Howdy folks, and welcome to another episode of Mingles with Jingles. And it's going to be, I'm having a busy day today. Not too sure about the rest of the week, but Monday is definitely going to be a busy day for me because I've got a new PC arriving. Not sure exactly when, but probably by the time you get to watch this episode of Mingles with Jingles, I'm going to be struggling with cables and packing crates and all the usual stuff that comes with setting up a new PC. There's nothing wrong with the old PC. In fact, the old PC isn't even that old. I'm going to be keeping it as a backup. But while it's perfectly adequate for running the latest games in high resolution and with all of the graphical settings turned up to 11, it's not quite up to the task of streaming the latest games at the highest possible graphics settings. A couple of weeks ago I was streaming World of Warships. It was when I was doing the Training Your Noob videos, where I was basically showing Rita the ropes, and she's actually gotten quite addicted to World of Warships as a result, but because I was streaming it at the time, and when I'm playing it by myself, 60 frames per second, no problem, if not higher, but trying to stream it, well, it started off alright, but towards the end of the stream people thought that Twitch was dropping frames, and it wasn't. It was that World of Warships was slowing down to 20 frames per second or less. I've had the same thing when I've been trying to stream other graphically intensive games, like for example Ghost Recon Wildlands. Just didn't want to know. Computer couldn't keep up with the strain of processing it for me and uploading and streaming it at the same time. And it was a lot more noticeable in Ghost Recon, which, let's face it, is a lot more graphics intensive than World of Warships. And so I thought, well, I'm going to have to bite the bullet and upgrade my system. Means I'm going to be eating beans for the rest of the month, but well, you know, this is my job. So, just in case you're interested in the specs of the new PC, and I'm sure plenty of you probably are, because you're going to want to criticise my choice, because that's the way things work on the internet. Where do we start? Processor, yes, it's an Intel Core i7 quad-core, running at 4.3 GHz with 8 MB of cache. Memory, 32 GB of Corsair Vengeance DDR4. Video processing, the more memory the better. I mean, I don't need 32 GB to run Ghost Recon Wildlands or World of Warships, but when you're processing video, the more memory you have, the better. Graphics card, an 8 GB GeForce GTX 1080. Yeah, it's pretty hefty. 2 hard disks, a 250 GB solid state boot drive, and the more traditional 4 TB hard drive. I think it's a Seagate Barracuda Pro. It's a 7,200 RPM drive. Is that good? I really don't know. I'm more concerned about the fact that it will allow me to keep up to 4 TB of video, because you wouldn't believe how quickly your hard drive fills up if you're processing video all day. So yeah. Oh, and also a game capture card, which should really help with the streaming if, you know, everything that I've already mentioned isn't enough, and it should be. So hopefully this is going to keep me future-proofed for quite some time. It bloody well better, because it wasn't cheap. Like I said, I'm going to be eating beans for the rest of the month. So, that's what I'm going to be doing today. Wish me luck. And with that kind of PC setup, I should be able to stream anything and still maintain good, solid, high frame rates. I won't be restricted to just doing, well, South Park The Stick of Truth and old LucasArts graphic adventure games. Not that there's anything wrong with those games, South Park in particular. I really must get my ass into gear and do part 4 of that playthrough. In fact, I am going to be doing that at some point this week, so keep an eye on Twitter and my Facebook page for an announcement, or, you know, just follow me on Twitch and you should get a notification when I'm about to go live. So, what else have I been up to this week? Well, you've probably noticed, judging by my YouTube video content over the last couple of weeks, that I have become absolutely addicted to Heliborne. I've actually put 47 hours into that game since it was released on Steam. Am I just weird like that? Do other people do the same thing? Do I just have some kind of obsessive-compulsive personality where I get a new game and I really like it, and I won't play anything but that game for weeks? Because I was like that with Total War Warhammer 2 when that came out as well. Actually, more on that in a moment. I've managed to, I think, at least break the back of my Heliborne addiction. I mean, I'm still playing it every day, but I'm no longer playing it for 6 hours a day. Is that too much? It seems like it's too much. Yeah. Unfortunately, Warhammer 2 Total War has now taken over as my addiction of choice, because they've just gone ahead and released the Mortal Empires patch for Warhammer 2. I mean, it was a big enough game to begin with, but with this new patch, which they always promised was coming out shortly after Warhammer 2 was released, what it does is, assuming you already own Warhammer Total War 1 and Warhammer Total War 2, this is a free patch that basically puts both maps onto one absolutely huge world map. So all of the factions from the first game, all of the DLC factions, and all of the factions from the second game are now fighting it out on the same map, which is twice the size, at least, of either of the maps in the two games as standalones. And it's great. There's just one slight problem. You know when you're playing a game like Civilization, at the beginning, once you've finished doing whatever it is that you need to do in any given turn, and you hit that end turn button, a couple of seconds go by while the computer figures out what all the other factions are going to do. But the longer you play a game of Civilization, the longer it takes the computer to resolve what the other factions are doing when you hit the end turn button, because they've grown in size as well, so there's more for the computer to think about before it'll let you have your turn again. And that's with 5, 6, maybe 7 factions in a game of Civilization. I don't think there's ever less than 20 factions in a game of Warhammer Total War. And that's just if you're playing Warhammer 1 or Warhammer 2. If you're playing the Mortal Empires patch with all of the factions from both, the very first time you press that end turn button, you can go away and make a cup of coffee, right? And come back before it's your turn again. It can sometimes take longer to resolve what all of the other factions are doing than to deal with your own turn. And it never gets any faster. Right? So, yeah, let's just say, I'm not saying it's bad. It's not. It's very good. I have been completely addicted to Warhammer Total War all over again with the release of the Mortal Empires patch. But it's not for people with short attention spans. I've managed to make it through by having Netflix running on my second monitor, so when I hit that end turn button, I've got something to do while the computer figures out what it's doing with everybody who isn't me, and decides I can have another go. I've so far managed to get through the entire 10th season of Big Bang Theory. I've watched The Martian, and about half of a season of Mr. Robot, all while supposedly playing a computer game. Well, anyway, moving along swiftly. Earlier on this week, this is going to be good. This is another episode of dumb shit that Rita said. It's been a while, but trust me, this is really going to be worth the wait. So what happened was last week, there's a brewery in town. I wasn't even aware that this place existed. But there is apparently a brewery in town, and not only is there a brewery, but this brewery also has a tap room, which is basically kind of like a pub in the brewery, where you can go and sit down and enjoy some fantastic beer at a fraction of the price that you would pay for beer in a pub. So, you know, it's all good. Also, they've got pork pies in this place. Pork pies are sort of traditional British pub food, although the pork pies that you traditionally get in a British pub, well, technically they do contain pork, in that pigs have lips and arseholes, because that's what gets mashed up and gets put into your normal British pub pork pies. But this place, there's actually chunks of stuff that's recognisable as pork inside these pies. They're fantastic. But anyway, I digress. We went along to this pub to meet Ed Francis, who's a friend of ours, works at the Tank Museum at Bovington, and has recommended a bunch of great museums for me to visit. In fact, you may have even seen him in a couple of my very, very early museum visit videos. In particular, the I can't remember the name of the place, Shrivenham, the Defence something Centre. Anyway, I'm getting off the point here. So we're sitting there, enjoying some fine ale, some really good pork pie, and we're talking about World of Warplanes. Now, Ed and I both agree that World of Warplanes, certainly since they've relaunched it, it is a fun game to play. I mean, it's no simulator, obviously, but it was never intended to be. It's an arcade flight game. And certainly with the relaunch of World of Warplanes, we both agree that they've done a pretty good job. But we got talking about what it was like before the relaunch, in particular the aircraft lineup that was available for the various different nations, and the just utterly bizarre choices of aircraft that they'd included. And the bizarre choice of aircraft that they had chosen not to include. For example, the Stuka, the Ju-87 dive bomber. Utterly iconic Second World War German aircraft. In fact, it was difficult to find a German Blitzkrieg propaganda poster that didn't have Stukas overhead supporting the Panzers. And yet it was never in the game originally. Instead, they chose to put aircraft in that nobody had ever heard of. Sort of prototypes that never made it past the pre-production stage. So anyway, we're having this discussion about the lunacy of just not including some of the most iconic military aircraft of the Second World War into their game right from the start. And Rita's sitting there with this completely blank expression on her face. It's obvious she has no idea what we're talking about. So I said, Rita, do you know the aircraft we're discussing? The Ju-87? Nope. The Stuka dive bomber, German Second World War dive bomber. You must have seen pictures of it. I haven't. No, sorry. No idea what you're talking about. And that really did surprise me, because you don't have to be a military aviation buff to be aware that certain things exist. I mean, you don't have to have seen the movie Memphis Belle to be aware that the B-17 bomber existed. You don't have to have watched The Longest Day or the Battle of Britain to know that Spitfires and Stukas existed, because, well, like I said, it's difficult to find an example of a German World War II propaganda Blitzkrieg poster that doesn't have Ju-87s overhead in support of the Panzers. And that kind of surprised me, that she had no idea what we were talking about. But I thought maybe it's just the case that she doesn't know what it's called, but if I were to show her a picture of it, she'd go, oh, that thing. Yeah, I just didn't know what it was called, but yeah, I've seen those. Everybody's seen those. That I could understand. And Rita has actually been developing a bit of an interest in aircraft lately. I mean, she can tell you what an F-86 Sabre and a G91 look like because she's been building model kits of them. Purely and simply because those are aircraft that the Portuguese Air Force used during the 1960s and 70s. So she does have some interest in aircraft, but I thought, well, I'll try to get to the bottom of this, and also try to prove my point of the just utterly bizarre choices that Wargaming initially made and what aircraft to introduce into World of Warplanes. Because there are some aircraft that are just so well known that everybody knows what they are, everybody's heard of them, even if they're not aviation historians or even remotely interested in the subject of military aircraft. So I said to her, okay, experiment time. Name any British World War II fighter aircraft, and I'm expecting to hear Hawker Hurricane, Supermarine Spitfire, or even if she doesn't know who made them, I'm expecting to hear Hurricane or Spitfire. So she ponders this one for a few seconds and then she says, the Warspite? Not the Hurricane, not the Spitfire, no. Rita's choice for iconic World War II British fighter aircraft was the 33,000-ton Queen Elizabeth class battleship, His Majesty's ship Warspite. So Ed and I both kind of stare at each other in amazement for a couple of seconds and then both start popping ribs with laughter. And so Rita, aware at this point that she'd said something incredibly stupid, goes into recovery mode, and you can see her brain going into panic mode and trying to come up with an alternative suggestion to prove that she does actually have some clue of what she's talking about. And I've got to be fair, it only took her a couple of seconds to come back with a second attempt. Unfortunately, that second attempt was the Focke-Wulf. Proving that she just doesn't know when to shut up. So, yeah. You know, all things considered, well, I did honestly believe that not including utterly iconic aircraft into the initial release of World of Warplanes was just a ludicrous decision on behalf of Wargaming. It turns out that some of these aircraft weren't quite as iconic as I might have believed. Oh well, what are you going to do? Anyway, moving along swiftly. It's all been about the Halloween events lately, hasn't it? Fractured Space had their Halloween event, which I did a video on last week. The World of Warships Halloween event has been absolutely fantastic, and, well, you kind of come to expect this of World of Warship whenever they do an event. They are usually pretty damn good. World of Tanks got in on the act as well. Normally, World of Tanks events are pretty spectacular as well. Everybody remember the 100 Years of the Tank thing that they did? That was amazingly good. So, when I heard the news that for Halloween in World of Tanks this year they were putting 2 brand new tanks into the game, event-only tanks, but they were multi-turret tanks. So, for the very first time ever in World of Tanks, we're getting multi-turret tanks. And also, as well as being able to play these 2 tanks in random battles against other players playing these 2 tanks, they've introduced, for what I think must be the first time, a co-op battle in World of Tanks using these 2 Halloween tanks. So I thought, well, wow, history in the making here, I must have a go at this. So I logged into World of Tanks, I set up my Franken and my Stein, those are the 2 new tanks. I selected the co-op battle event, pressed the battle button, and waited. And then I waited some more, and then I waited a little bit more, and after 5 minutes of waiting it dumped me back out into the garage. It was unable to find a game, which I suppose is understandable because there were only 5,000 people sitting in the queue with me. You can understand why the matchmaker might have trouble putting a team together. Undeterred, I thought I'll have another go. 5 minutes later, no match found, dumped back into the garage. I thought I'll give it the good old college try, you never know, 3rd time lucky. 5 minutes later, dumped back into the garage. The matchmaker couldn't find another dozen people of the 5,000 that were sitting in the queue to get me into a game with. Seriously, World of Tanks? Because I really want to know, how do you fuck that up? Everybody's in the same tanks. It's not like the matchmaking can be that hard. And there are 5,000 people waiting to get in. How can you not manage to put a team together? I don't know. The only reason I could think of was that the World of Tanks servers have a limited capacity for hosting co-op battle rooms. Because there's a limit to the number of I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's a limit to the number of training rooms that can be up at any given time on a World of Tanks server. You can't all just log into World of Tanks and try to host a training room, because it doesn't have the server capacity for it. And in fact, when you're there in the match browser, looking at the available training rooms, it will only show you the first 50. There might be 200 training rooms up, but the guys in the training room number 51 to 200, nobody's joining their training rooms because the server browser only displays the first 50. So it's entirely possible that something similar might have been going on for the co-op battle Halloween event. It may have been that the server was only capable of hosting, and I'm just pulling a number at random out of my arse here, but it may only have been capable of hosting up to 50 Halloween co-op battle events at any given time. And so once it had those 50 games running, the thousands of other people queuing up were literally just sitting in limbo, with absolutely no chance of ever getting into a game. But of course they don't know that, because the matchmaking screen is still sitting there saying looking for battle. Now, I must hasten to state here that I don't actually know what the number of concurrent PvE co-op battle events the server was capped at during this Halloween event. In fact, I don't even know if there was a cap. But it does seem like the most logical explanation given what we currently know. But here's the thing. Who could possibly have predicted? I mean, who could possibly have guessed that if you're running multi-turret tanks for the first time ever in World of Tanks, and you're putting those multi-turret tanks into a cooperative battle for the first time ever in World of Tanks, who could possibly have predicted that thousands of people might want to actually have a go? Oh, I could. But apparently Wargaming didn't. So once again, Wargaming, seriously, inquiring minds want to know, how do you fuck that up? Well, while we're on the subject of things that have pissed me off this week, question time. Does anybody out there actually use Microsoft Edge? Does anybody out there even know what Microsoft Edge is? It's the browser that comes by default built into Windows 10. So if you bought a PC in the last year, you probably know what Microsoft Edge is, and you probably don't use it because, you know, it's Microsoft. I myself use Google Chrome. There are plenty of other alternative browsers out there. Opera, Firefox, you name it. Everybody's got their own favourite browser. I'm pretty sure hardly anybody uses Microsoft Edge, however. And yet, despite the fact that I don't use it, and I've never used it, it's still managing to piss me off. You see, Microsoft Edge doesn't like it when you don't use it, and every time you don't use Microsoft Edge... Actually, it's not strictly true that I've never used Microsoft Edge. I did use it to download and install Chrome, and then I've never used it since. But it just seems like every time I flash up Chrome lately, Microsoft Edge keeps popping up saying, "Hey, I can see you're not using me. Do you know that I am faster, stronger, sexier, safer, smarter than whatever browser it is you happen to be using?" Okay, I get it. You buy Windows 10, you install it. It comes with Edge, its own built-in web browser. I can kind of appreciate why, say for the first month after you've installed Windows 10 and you flash up a different browser, I can kind of understand why it might want to remind you that Microsoft Edge actually exists. You don't have to use other browsers. You've got a browser that you've bought and paid for with Windows 10. So I can kind of understand why in the first month after you've installed Windows 10, Edge pops up just reminding you that you have a choice, because it is all about choice at the end of the day. What's pissing me off is that Edge doesn't seem to understand that 6 months after I've installed Windows 10, 6 months of repeatedly telling Edge, no, thank you for your interest, but I'm actually quite happy with the browser that I have chosen to use, and it still can't take the hint. No matter how many times, on a weekly basis, I am forced to tell Edge to go and screw itself, that perhaps, after being told no, firmly and emphatically, 40 or 50 times, you have to come to the conclusion that this browser isn't quite as smart as it wants you to think it is. Also, I want to know what the hell's going on with my mobile phone. What is it doing when it's not supposed to be doing anything? You're probably aware of the story of my mobile phone by now. I really don't like phones. I'm a bit of a technophobe when that sort of thing's concerned. But I have to have one, so I've got one. And when I got it, the primary consideration was how long the battery was going to last, because I was sick and tired of my previous phone needing to be recharged every 2 days while I never used it for anything. So the primary consideration when I got this phone was how long the battery lasted, and it certainly delivers on that score, because I can leave this thing fully charged in emergency standby mode for 4 months before it needs to be recharged. So I'm quite happy with that. So all I really do with this phone is every couple of days I'll pick it up and look at it to see if I've missed any messages, and well, usually I haven't. Which begs the question, if the phone's in emergency standby mode and I am not using it for anything and nobody is sending me any messages, why, every time I pick it up, it's suddenly developed hundreds of megabytes of trash files that need to be cleaned? And it's not just the trash files that seem to be coming from nowhere. It's also quite insistent on reminding me that there are all kinds of apps running that are overheating the phone and degrading the performance. Who's running these apps? Because it's not me. In fact, one of the first things that I did when I got the phone, and which I do every couple of months, is I go in and I make sure that there are no unnecessary apps booting themselves up at startup. So who's starting all of these apps? I'm not the one doing it. I'm absolutely mystified. I really, really am. At first I thought, oh, maybe there's some kind of spyware or malware on my phone. But they couldn't be, because I never turned the bloody thing on. The only app that I have installed on this thing is, well, an authenticator, because you have to if you install anything through Uplay, and my banking app, and that's it. Mind you, it is a Chinese phone, so maybe I don't know, the Chinese Secret Intelligence Services of but who's going to be spying on me? I mean, I don't use the phone for anything. The only thing the Chinese Secret Intelligence Services are going to get out of my phone is, this guy doesn't use his phone very much, does he? I mean, that's... and I don't. So I am absolutely mystified as to where all this crap is coming from. If anybody has any suggestions, please let me know in the comments, because I have no idea what's going on. Well, I wanted to end this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles with a couple of announcements. First, Well, it's been so long that you probably don't even remember, but I have been doing voice acting for a World of Tanks Machinima video series done by Honest Gaming on YouTube. Well, we finally got around to doing episode 7, and it's been up since Saturday on Honest Gaming's YouTube channel. I don't want to give any spoilers, but he's outdone himself this time, and if you have no idea what I'm talking about, that's fine. Just go to the link in the video description and prepare to be entertained. And the second thing that I wanted to announce this week, I can't remember. Well, it can't have been that important. You know, I really should write these things down. Yeah, well, it can't have been that important if I can't remember it, so I'll probably kick myself half an hour from now and have to come back and re-edit this video in order to squeeze it in at the end, but, whatever. Anyway, that's it for this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles. I hope you enjoyed it, and as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.